Oh, I didn't need that. Okay, that better. Okay. You remember there's no class next week. I keep on repeating that because inevitably someone shows up and goes and reports the nasty professor who wasn't in the class. So I will put it also on your announcements. I forgot to put it on, quite frankly, but I will put it on today. Today we're going to talk about the legislative process as it works in the U.S. Why don't you hold your conversation, hold your conversation for later, or go in the hall and have it. I don't care if you go in the hall and have it. For the latest information on legislators and policy, too late for your paper, some of you dealt with policy and you were devoid the latest material. The latest material is on the American Journal of Nursing, primarily the other journals for specialty policy, and Capital Update, which is available for free through nursingworld.org. It's the official policy update of the American Nurses Association. And other than briefs, which you get if you're involved in any work on policy, and this does not cost you a cent. For instance, I receive updates weekly on the joint protocol. Now, we talked about this. I hope you remember somewhere in your head. The joint protocol is the document which advanced practice nurses in New Jersey are expected to have executed with a physician in order to use their prescriptive authority. It's only for prescription of medication, nothing else, just prescription of medication. And it's reviewed once a year. I call the physician who signs my joint protocol once a year, usually in May or June, and we discuss the latest drugs, what I've been using, etc. And he may have some comments, but it's a collaborative thing. It's not a supervisory thing. The joint protocol, you know, has been stuffing my email box now for a year, is under consideration to be carved out of the law. In other words, you can introduce a piece of legislation that simply says, remove the joint protocol. And that would have the end result of making advanced practice nurses totally independent for prescriptive authority in the state of New Jersey. That's been a mammoth undertaking in the nursing community for the last year or two. We never expected we'd get so far this year. The bill has been introduced under the title Access to Health Care, and there are other things in there. But why access to health care? Because with ACA 2010, that's the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, whatever you care to call it, with ACA 2010, there are going to be about 41 million more people who will have access to primary care services. And I feel that nurses, advanced practice nurses, are not a cheaper alternative. They're the best, absolutely the best person, the best provider to be giving you primary care. And we feel it's unjust and inappropriate to have a requirement for anyone else to sign off on our work. So that's the explanation. It's currently in committee, and we're going to review what happens to bills as they move through the system. So if you are involved in any way in New Jersey, you would be getting these weekly missives telling you what's going on. You don't have to be a member of anything, and in fact, as a student, you couldn't be a member of the New Jersey State Nurses Association, and they're doing the majority of the work. But you could put your name in there on the QT. They'll take anyone's name who's interested because you're citizens. You have the right to vote. And as such, you talk to neighbors and friends, and the strength for the bill will become bigger and bigger if you know about it. So that has been one thing, that information is of the minute and comes through your involvement in the movement. It could be just being a member of the State Nurses Association, or it could be being involved in groups that are doing this type of work, or meeting legislators, or there are scripts that have been developed to tell you what to say if you're going to meet with someone. So any of you that know a legislator, email me and I will send you all that, because the more people that intervene with our elected officials, the better. All right, the legislative setting. I'm going to buy them an electronic screen to address this. All right, the legislative setting is made up heavily of aides and assistants who sort out and sum up background material. And these are people who work for your legislator. Then there are also committee staff. There are multiple committees in the legislature to whom bills are sent, and each one of those committees has staff. It's more important, if you're lobbying for a piece of legislation, to get to the aides in the legislator's office or the members of the committee that staff the work than it is to see the legislator. I can remember years ago when we were getting reform through on nursing homes. There was a time when nursing homes had no obligation to even have one RN on their staff. And we pushed heavily to have reforms through legislation that would mandate that you had to have so many nurses on duty at all time. You had to have a chief nurse. You had to have someone that was in charge of staff development. There were all sorts of things in the nursing home reform bill. The chair of the nursing of the health committee in the Senate was Warren Hatch. He's a Republican, he's still there, a Republican from Utah, a wonderful man, very level-headed, very caring. He told us, you don't have to talk to me because John Jones is my point person on this legislation. Convince him that what you want to do is right. And then the other person we worked closely with was Senator Bill Bradley. He was for years an icon. You know who Bill Bradley is? Some of you do. All right, Bill Bradley was a basketball star with the Knicks in his youth. He went to Princeton. After he graduated from Princeton, he went with the Knicks. He was with them for the length of what you can expect from any athlete. You know, they're done by the time they're 30. And he put down roots in New Jersey. He still lives in Morris County, and his wife is a professor at William Paterson University. Still lives here, but was in the Senate for many terms, and just a wonderful friend of healthcare and of nursing. And same thing with him. You saw him, I saw him maybe once during the whole time I was working on the legislation, and he said, listen, so-and-so in my office knows the long-term care scene inside and out. You convince him and you have my vote. And that's the way they operate. So it's much more important to know the aides and the people who are doing their research and their background work than it sometimes is the legislator. The legislator themselves is the outside person. Is the person that knows significant others to get you support, but they are not the people who have the technical grasp of every aspect of the bill. Influencing the legislative process can be dramatically helped by, and particularly with newer legislators, by getting to their constituency. That is called grassroots lobbying. It's become a formal term, grassroots lobbying. Getting to the people who elect the legislator and convincing them. Senator Nancy Muniz has become a great friend of nursing, probably because she's a nurse. She's an advanced practice nurse, and she's in the New Jersey Senate. And she's been wonderful to us. In exchange, nurses have come out in force to get support for Nancy for re-election. She's in the Morris County area, and we have nurses for Muniz up there beating the bushes to get contributions and to gain grassroots support. For everything you do, there has to be a give back. And you better learn that. That's politics. And most of the time, it's good. Sometimes we don't like how it's coming about, but that's the way this country works. Nancy Muniz is the sponsor of the legislation, Healthcare Access Bill, that will carve out the joint protocol. She understands it fully, and we make sure of that. You have to make sure your legislators know what they're talking about, but she's become so proficient now, it's a pleasure to hear her speak about it. We've had a series of town halls throughout the state, nurses, bringing other people too, but she's spoken at all of them. She's very articulate. She knows what this legislation means. So, and it's due to the grassroots support that we've been able to entice her to come along with us. Now, I said she is an APA. She's a graduate of Cornell, worked at New York Hospital for many years until she married and got into politics. So she's no neophyte. She knows nursing. But when you get into things like the bill we're sponsoring today, you have to have state-of-the-art knowledge. And probably not every APN has that. So it was quite a challenge to update her and get her on board, but she's solidly on board now. Co-jointly with working with her, there have been special interest groups and professional interest groups that have formed to push this legislation. And the money to do what we've had to do comes from largely from our political action committees. Political action committees exist for two reasons: to support candidates that are doing what they want and to educate the public. That's all. All right? And both the New Jersey State Nurses Association and the ANA have a PAC, a Political Action Committee. The ANA Political Action Committee is the most richly funded, next to the American Medical Association, most richly funded healthcare PAC in Washington. And we have an overwhelming percentage of the legislators that we sponsor that are voted into office. It's somewhere like 96% of the people we support get elected. It's interesting, legislators have surfaced in New Jersey from time to time who have been particular friends of nursing. They've done a lot for us, and we always pay back, even if it's not, and it's not always just members of the State Nurses Association. Like there was a very powerful political action group, a special interest group that got Dean Gallo reelected for years. Dean Gallo was a senator in the state who was a firm supporter of nursing and the things we felt had to be done. Any of you who live in Morris County, is there anyone who lives in Morris Plains or around that area? All right, as you go up Hanover Avenue, and on your right, if you make a right, there's Greystone State Hospital. Have you heard of that? Big hospital out there. One time had 9,000 mentally ill in it. It's down to about 900 now with the mental health acts. But Greystone's on the right. And on the left, there is what looks like a condo development. But it's not one of these high-end condo developments. It's made of, it's all wood construction, and they're two-story houses, and there are loads of them. That is the Dean Gallo housing. And that housing is run by ARC, A-R-C, which is an organization in New Jersey whose mission it is to provide housing for the developmentally disabled. These people are not people who are unable, many of them work, and they have transport to get them to their work in the morning, and they live in these condo-type buildings. They're one-floor apartments, as far as I know. It's not two-floor, one-floor. And there's a resident 24-hour manager who lives there, who's there for emergencies. You have a blockage or a pipe burst, etc. But he's someone who works off-site. He lives there for emergencies, and they provide all the services, but all of these houses are operated through ARC. And if you look carefully on one of them, it says the Dean Gallo housing. He was a senator from Morris County. Wonderful man. Wonderful man, did so much for us. All right, influencing legislation. Lobbying with a capital L is another way to influence legislation, and that's when members of special interest groups, professional groups, actually intervene with legislators to try to sell what they want to pass. There's a little L and there's a big L. Little L is grassroots lobbying. That's when you call your congressman or senator either on the national level or the state level and ask if you can see him or her, or send them a note, or send them one of the public opinion notes. Every legislator's site plugs into a public opinion note. You can send, it's a paperless type thing. You type in your comments and send it off. You can do it that way. That's little help. Grassroots lobbying. Lobbying by the people. And believe me, from the newest senator and assemblyman and congressperson to the most seasoned, they read them. I had a daughter who worked for several years while she was in college for Ted Kennedy. And he used to be in, not every day, obviously, she was in Boston, and he used to come up at least once every 2 weeks and wanted to see every message from one of his constituents, every message. And if whatever your message was well stated, it often moved him to action. She used to tell me comments like he used to say, I never knew this was the situation. How come no one ever told me? Someone has to be accountable for this. Let's get on this right away. So grassroots lobbying, small L, does make a difference. Lobbying with a big L is an official lobbyist. And to be an official lobbyist and have access to walking around the Capitol, you have to be registered. All right? Only registered lobbyists are allowed in, and registered lobbyists work for different people. There are many firms in Trenton and in Washington. Usually they're law firms because you need a background in the law to do this work that sell lobbying services. They have to be very cautious that there's not a conflict of interest, that you're not representing two sides of the same issue if it's a very heated issue. But they sell their services. Now, in New Jersey, we do buy lobbying services for the Joint Protocol Bill. And they're just magnificent. They've been in all the town hall meetings. They're good people, and they know the issues. One is a nurse who works in a lobbying firm, and the others are people who have been in the Trenton scene for years and are owed plenty of favors. That's what you want for your big L lobbyist. And when we're not supporting a major piece of legislation like this, we do our own lobbying. We have a person on staff who does lobbying and is registered. But for something like this, you have to reach out for what they call the big guns. Because you know it's going to be dramatically opposed, and it is being wildly opposed by the medical societies and the medical organizations in the state. And I don't have to go over, maybe I'll paste one in one of my announcements, their arguments that nurses will miss all the serious problems, that nurses aren't educated the same way as physicians, nurses don't know how to prescribe or treat disease, the same old arguments, and at the bottom, I feel there's an economic motive. Because if nurses start treating people, aside from the fact that your patients will find out they're happy, I hear this from many patients who went to an APN after years of seeing physicians. They will say, my gosh, my physician never gave me the amount of time, never explained. I know much more. So I'm not here to give a commercial for the legislation, but it's from the perspective of the people. You should have the right and the freedom to go to who you want, to select who you want. So that's what's happening with that legislation right now. And hopefully we'll get it through before the end of this legislative session, which is in November. Right. No, the new Congress people and senators and assembly people are installed in January. So they're elected in November, and then there is what's called a lame duck session. Are you familiar with that? That is a session where nothing substantial can be accomplished because you're going out of office, and they know you're going out of office because you weren't reelected. On the other hand, it's often an opportunity to get big things through because people are coming back to the Capitol angry that they weren't reelected, and they often have an open ear. They're not running for anything else that minute, so they have an open ear to doing what's right. So we will see how that works. Any question about the legislative process? It's fascinating. Yes, politics is embedded in it. Politics can be something that we look askance at. We're afraid of some of the relationships, but it's the closest thing to being perfect that we have, and it's worked for, 300 years almost, and we haven't had any revolution. Think of that, and other countries, how many coups and revolutions they have over the years. We've never had one, even when we had a president shot. Business went on, same as it always did, and we very interesting set of affairs in this country. All right, how a bill becomes a law. A bill germinates in the minds of people, and they go to a legislature and they inquire whether there isn't something can be done through the legislative process to correct their situation. That's where a bill usually starts. The legislator assigns you a member of his staff, and he gives the direction, after hearing your case, for this person to work with you, and that person will help draft a bill, usually will draft it. They have bill writers in Trenton or in Washington, will draft a bill which accomplishes what you want. The first thing that happens to that is given a number. Senate Bill 125, Assembly 110. All right, the bill, and it's the same process, be it at the national level or state level, exactly the same process. It is then read to the Congress, and it is assigned a committee. Very critical what committee your bill goes to. If there is a strong leader and one that likes you, it will get out of committee. If it's someone that thinks you're a nuisance, that has a general distaste for the bill, it will get buried and never get out of committee. Now, is that fair? It's politics. So how do you get it out? Just a year ago, Assemblyman Tom Kane, he's the son of Tom Kane, the past governor, who has almost ascended to statehood, to sainthood. I'm saying that in a joking sense, but he's a very, very revered man. He chaired the 9/11 Commission in Washington. He's the chair of the board of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, which is based in Princeton. It's the largest healthcare philanthropy, the most money in the United States. He's very prominent, Tom Kane, and his son is an assemblyman from some section in Hunterdon County. And there was a bill that had been buried in committee. I can't remember what it was. It makes no difference. But Tom Kane Jr. brought a piece of legislation to the floor of the House, demanding that it be released from committee. Yes, you can do that. But you have to get someone who's going to do it. And even more important, if very powerful people want that bill killed and buried, it's going to be hard to have it surface. But he did it, and it did surface. I forget what it was, but it was some controversial vote. All right. Once it comes out of committee, it goes to the House for a second reading. And then there's a third reading before a vote. And during the interims between these readings, the bill can be changed. It's changed by amendments proposed on the floor, etc. Then it goes to the other house. So if it went through the Senate in the state of New Jersey, it then turns around and goes through the Assembly. Hopefully, it comes out. An option to that is some legislation. There are two bills introduced immediately, one to the Senate, one to the Assembly, and they both go through at the same time. But regardless of whether it's two bills going through at the same time or one bill going through one house and up and through the other, at the end, if there are too many changes that have been made and the sense of the bill has been changed, a joint conference committee is called to iron out the rough spots. Joint conference committee includes people from both houses and both parties. And they sit together, and if the changes are too profound, I mean really, like the joint protocol bill right now, one of the changes that has been made is that any nurse graduating from an advanced practice program has to be supervised for 6 months in her or his work. There has to be someone supervising them in their prescriptive practices before they get total independent prescriptive authority. This person supervising them is to be an advanced practice nurse, one of their own. Now, if that's been pretty acceptable to everyone. If the medical society steps in and offers an amendment from the floor, and that amendment is supported, and the amendment says that nurses must be supervised by a physician for 6 months, I don't think the nursing community will buy it. What they'll do is kill the bill. How do you kill the bill? You go to your sponsors and ask them to withdraw it. All right? That's how this works. Because when you start off, you have to know in your head what is the worst case scenario you will accept. To us, the worst thing is to have physicians crawling in the back door to supervise us when we kick them out the front door. And that's just what it is. Right? So I think that would be unacceptable, but I'm not running the show. And it would be the lobbyists who would know. And since our lobbyists are being paid by the State Nurses Association would probably make that call. All right, after it goes to through the two houses, and the Joint Conference Committee irons out the glitches. Remember, they iron it out, and there's been pretty common agreement that the bill hasn't been changed that much. So it doesn't have to go through the houses again. It goes to the governor. And he will sign or veto, and a pocket veto is doing nothing. That's another term, pocket veto. Then it can go back to the Congress or the legislature to override the veto. And you need 2/3 affirmative vote, 2/3 of the members of both houses voting separately in the affirmative to override a veto. It's rare to have the decision of the governor or the president overrode. But there is one example, and I mentioned it here a long time ago when we were talking about research. What was that? If you're just hesitant about speaking, it's good practice. All right. The National Center for Nursing Research was part of the National Institutes of Health. It was called the National Center for Nursing Research first. And then in subsequent years, it was changed to the National Institute of Nursing Research, NINR. You're going to hear this constantly through your career. You'll hear it, you should have heard it in Dr. Yarchesky's research class. NINR, National Institute of Nursing Research, which started out as a center. And that was an override of Reagan's presidential veto. He was a good man, but nursing was not, he didn't dislike us, but we were not one of the favored people on his list. And he vetoed the bill that established the National Center of Nursing Research. Ted Kennedy reintroduced it and gave a moving speech when he reintroduced it. I still have a copy of it somewhere because every word that's uttered in the Congress goes in the congressional record. They have somebody typing there all day, I guess, but it's the congressional record comes out every day and includes every word spoken the day before. And his speech in support of the override was moving. What he said, in essence, was that nurses were the backbone of the healthcare delivery system. And their work in advocacy, all the stuff we've been talking about, and self-care had the capacity to save us money and to achieve miracles, but not if we weren't funded to do the research on our work. And it passed. It passed. And I think his presentation had a lot to do with it. And you could probably go into legislation.com or thomas.com. That's the Thomas Jefferson. That's the website of the U.S. Congress. And go back in the archives and find his speech. But that was the only override that I can remember in my memory. Of course, I didn't start being aware of it till that happened. All right. Then the bill became a law either by the governor or the president signing it or by an override of a veto. Then it goes to one of the executive branch of the government agencies to have, for rulemaking, administrative law, rules and regulations. Almost no bill can be implemented the way it sounds when it becomes a law. Good bills are broad and vague, or you can change them every year, and it's impossible. The amount of work would be idiotic. So the bills have to be broad, but they have to have enough meat so that if they're contested, the Supreme Court can get direction from the bill. The Supreme Court interprets the law. That's what it does, interpret the law and the Constitution, Supreme Court. And there's been a lot of criticism of their interpretations. Sometimes an interpretation can have the end result of making new law. And that has still been the criticism of many people about the when they looked at the ACA 2010, the new healthcare legislation. You will remember that went to the Supreme Court. Haven't heard anything since, so that's interesting. Either their decision was so tight that it doesn't warrant more discussion, which I don't think, if you look at it, wasn't that tight. Or people really believe this has to happen. And that's a possibility too. So you stop debating it, and a few states will continue to appeal, but not an overwhelming appeal. So we go to the administrative agencies, and it is illegal to lobby the administrative agencies. You should please remember that. It's illegal. You did your lobbying in the legislature. Once a bill goes to the administrative agencies for rule making or rules and regulations, it's done. You educate them. You educate. You educate the agencies to different ways of looking at things and different ways they might state the rules and regulations, but it is illegal to lobby. It's a subtle point, but one you should be aware of. And there's the Federal Bill website. Good old Tom. All right, you can review this on yourself, by yourself. What I've done is just put some things down that if you visit a legislator for some purpose, you go prepared. And don't laugh at this. I wish all of you could be fired up enough about something to go visit your legislator. You're going to be shocked. First of all, it is possible to see the person directly, but if you come with an agenda, they will pull in their aides and probably leave you with the aides, and it's no insult. It's quite a good thing because it's that aide that is the specialist in your area. But what you'll find out is that your opinion makes a difference. And I remember the first time I spoke to a legislator. I met him on the Garden State Parkway at the coffee stop south of the Raritan River. Never forget. Psychiatric nurses were in a horrible state of affairs because the state had just, through rulemaking, established a new category of counselor, a marriage counselor. Now, people were counseling married couples long before that, but they didn't have, they weren't recognized in the law. Psychologists, nurses, social workers, a lot of people were doing marriage counseling, but they didn't have a specific recognition. And this sneaked past us. So someone suggested I meet with this state senator from the South. He was head of the health committee, and he was very open and fair. And I met him on the Garden State Parkway. He was on his way up to Trenton, and I don't know, I think it was going nowhere, but he agreed to meet me there. And it was a profound, life-changing event. He got out his tablet and wanted to know, and was really interested in what advanced practice nurses do, and why shouldn't there be a bill, or it was rules and regulations, recognizing marriage counselors. And you explained it to him, and he heard you, he put it down, and within a month, those regs were shut down. They were gone, and they never appeared again. All right? So that convinced me. It was the first interaction I had, and it convinced me that they do listen. I just called my state senator about the joint protocol, and I've met him socially many, many times. He's very pro-medicine, so I didn't expect a joyous greeting from him, and he couldn't blow me off by saying, that crazy lady's on the phone, tell her I'm not here. But he talked to me, and I said up front to him right away, I know your constituency, and I know you're heavily involved with medicine in this county, but also know that there are 15,000 registered nurses in the state who would love to vote you out of office. And he listened. And he hasn't come out against it. That's the most, I guess, I can expect. But there are a lot of nurses. They can be moved to vote, and you should use that power when you have a need to. But when you go to see a legislator, you should know many things about them, like how they have voted on bills of concern to nurses. There's an ongoing, the congressional record and Thomas.gov is for federal legislation. There's a counterpart in the state, New Jersey.gov.leg, but if you go on Google, you'll bring it up. And you can bring up these legislators' voting records for 50 years back. You want to know how they voted on things that are important to us? Go look. Okay. Any questions at all on legislation and what our role is? Any questions? I wish we would have had time to go to Trenton during this course. It couldn't be mandatory because I couldn't beat you all to go. But maybe next year, you won't be here, but I'll put out a call if you want to go. Or if any of you really want to go this year yet. I know we're getting near the end of the semester, and you see the light at the end of the tunnel, maybe. But if you have a desire, just tell me. I can arrange it. It's back. It's a very important part of life in the U.S. And it operates exactly the same state to state. You have different personalities. You'll find a different spirit in each state. And that's why we're wed to states' rights. All right? And when you hear the term the new federalism, that's what it is often called, the new federalism. It's a new federalism is having a dominant unification of parts which are all different. So there are some rules for the federal, for the whole, but mostly it differs from state to state. A unique. Well, I think Russia had something like that in the old Soviet Union. There are places which Canada has an arrangement something like this, but no arrangement like this federalism has ever lasted so long and worked so well. Whether you think it works well, I think it works well. As I said, we haven't had coups and people killing each other in the streets here. All right, Some of the federal agencies there, this is just a list of them so that you can be a little conversant. Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, that has been a change in the last few years. There was always a Center for Medicare Services, but CAID was totally operated at the state level. Now, much of the CAID work has been filtered up to the federal government. And you can go to the CMS website and learn about Medicare and Medicaid programs. And you know, CARE is for the elderly, CAID is for the poor. All right? Then there's the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, which is very important, and they maintain the site guidelines.gov. I've mentioned that one to you before. Go into it. You can put any clinical condition in, and it will bring up the latest developments in public and private sector. For instance, you put in end of life, and it will bring up all the work that's being done in pain management and in isolation, and which are the two biggest things that trouble people at the end of life: the isolation and the pain. Those are the two biggest concerns. All right, you'll find everything that's being done nationally, and that site has grown. It was first established in 1992, and it's grown dramatically because there was an outcry that the government paid for a lot of research and nobody knew what it was. You had to spend days searching. This brings everything up at the flood of it. Put in childhood asthma, put in diabetes, put in workplace injustices. It even brings that up. It's miraculous, and that's maintained by AHRQ. The National Institutes of Health, you know, are quasi-governmental. They're partially governmentally funded, and they're the think tanks of the federal government. CDC mostly accumulates statistics on disease in this country. It does not maintain any healthcare sites except for one. Anybody know what it is? The CDC maintains one healthcare site for direct care. The leprosarium in Carville, Louisiana. Yes, we have a leprosarium. The only other one I know is Malachi in Hawaii. There's a leprosarium there, but I believe it was established and maintained by the churches. All right, leprosy still exists. Unless it's ignored, it doesn't bring about the profound cosmetic problems that it did years ago. That's why the leprosarium in Hawaii was established. Very interesting if you go there. You have to climb down on a rope. There's no way to get to the leprosarium except on a boat. And it was established in the 1800s. And when leprosy was dramatically contagious, it still is contagious, but in the States we controlled that. But you went to this place, and you could take your family. But once you got there, you didn't get out, because the only way was an ocean boat that came to the dock once a month, and other than that, you were stuck. And if you want to go today, you by land, because I don't think you can get out on the leprosarium boat. It's run by the government. But they have ropes that you can hang on and come down. There are cliffs all around this leprosarium. Very interesting history. It's the only other one. And I guess It was necessary there because leprosy is a disease that I believe had its roots in Asia. And so it was very easy to get over to the Hawaiian Islands. And when they found someone with the disease, they were consigned to the leprosary. Tidbits of information. Other things that would be of interest to you, SAMHSA, that's the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services of the federal government. And most of these agencies are concerned with public policy and research. Except for the leprosarium, they're not, and for the National Institutes of Health that runs the massive hospital in Bethesda, which is a research site. You don't go there because you live a block from the hospital. You go there if you've exhausted all other management for your condition, and there is major research going on there. And it's a wonderful place to work. It's also a place that gives students internships. So once you're in nursing and a summer comes, a year before, I think you need that much lead time, apply to the National Institutes of Health for an internship program. They have wonderful programs. Be venturous. Don't be stuck in one place. There are a lot of opportunities out there. Social Security Administration, going to talk about that. The place where nursing research evolves from is the National Institute of Nursing Research, which is under the National Institutes of Health. All of these agencies are not equal. Some are under others. And the Division of Nursing, which is under HRSA, 5th one down, Health Resources and Services Administration. These two are the places where the dollars for nursing research come out of. Until there was a National Institute of Nursing Research, really a center, but until there was that unit under NIH, all research money came out of the Division of Nursing. All research money. Now, only research on nursing education comes out of the division. And all clinical research comes out of NINR. And we don't have enough. We have many more grants, quality grants, than we have money. But all clinical research comes out of NINR, and all research to look at nursing education comes out of the division. And the division has the history. All of the monies for nursing programs comes out of the division. Like there are monies to support people with a bachelor's degree to go on for a master's in education so that you can teach. That's out of the division, right? There are a lot of monies for ethnic and racial minority students who don't have enough. So there are funds out of the division. If you're interested in any of these programs, go talk to Kyle Warren or one of his acolytes over there in Student Affairs. They should be able to tell you. If not, email me and you can come see me. Often, any of these programs, you have to go looking on your own. They're not going to tell you, and the university should have people who have all this information. They don't. So at least, and they want to help. So at least if you go in knowing the basics, it'll give them some background to try to help you. a little bit about ACA 2010, very little. Some of you probably know as much as me. Some of the papers were on it. There are going to be many more challenges before it becomes solidly established. I'm hedging my words because I don't want to say anything that's wrong here. All right. It is law. It's been tested by the Supreme Court, but there are still subtleties that people will resist. Like you know, Senator Christie has put in an exception for New Jersey, and he's right. We have done more for elderly people and kids and the uninsured and the low-income people in New Jersey than any other state. And New York has done more. New York has done more. Not New York State, but the borough of Manhattan has done, in addition to that. But we've done much here. We cover children far above 200% of the poverty level. We cover them till 21, not 26. So that would be something you have to look at. That would have to be, well, that's federal law, so that would be imposed. We have family first plans, which I've talked to people who have them because of low income. And these are not people who are on welfare or impoverished. They're people whose work doesn't earn them what it should. I talked to 3 artists who were working on, I'm on a committee to select the art for our building in New Brunswick. I want to say new building, it ain't so new anymore. I mean, it's been there, but there's nothing on the walls. And we had an artist do a piece personally for the college. And I just got into a discussion with he and his wife. They're insured through Family First, and it's great. And he's telling me, and the price is ridiculous. Well, he doesn't make much. Do you understand? An artist. He might get 1 commission this year and nothing for 5 years. Why does he work at it? Why doesn't he go out and get a better job? That's his business. But he qualifies for Family First. And Family First directs you to a managed care plan. You must use a managed care plan. And he's very satisfied with it. Of course, he hasn't got a family with profound health problems. Maybe that would be different if you had someone that needed extensive care and you wanted to choose where they went, because there is the lower the cost of insurance, the less choice you have. That's a gift. All right? So anyway, ACA 2010 aims to provide health services for every American. Everyone will be ushered in. Will Medicaid continue to exist? These are all things that haven't been worked out yet. Medicaid might well be folded in with the ACA framework, which calls for a network of managed care plans in every state. And this is what Christie is fighting. He claims that we've done a superb job with the networks we have. We'll do it, but we want to continue with the networks we have, not be forced to accept the government's networks. And the same with older people and the Drug Act. The older people through Medicare can buy drug coverage. You all know that, right? It is cheaper what we give out of New Jersey. We had a drug program before the national program for half the price. And so here the governor, too, 2 years ago, asked for an exemption. If you have a program that does it better, you should be exempt from the federal requirements. So you're going to see a lot of changes over the next year or so, but essentially it aims to cover every American, not aliens, not immigrants. Now know that. All right, and that's a big issue, and I don't know what to do about it. One of you debated that in your paper, and it's not enough to say, oh, they deserve it too. It's not enough to say that. They're not citizens. All right? Now, there are permanent residents. That's different. They've gone through that process. Like the men who are being sought, the one man, for the massacre at the Boston race. Both of them were legal residents, you know that. So that brings up a lot of issues and what should be looked at, etc. Okay, ACA is a combination of personal responsibility and government-sponsored initiatives, which is a truly American model. We talked about that before. And it gives virtually universal coverage. And it's dependent on public-private sector unification, which has been our tradition. So there's much, the devil in ACA is in the detail, not in the broad philosophy. The broad philosophy is truly American, but it's the detail. Who exactly should be covered? What should they be covered for? That's where we're going to have the problem of working out. All right, Social Security. Passed in 1935, really in response to the financial crash in 29. You all know, if you've had American history, that scenario, the fact that the government couldn't climb out, and in 35, it was FDR's first term, and he pushed for Social Security immediately to provide some financial comfort to the elderly and the disabled, and it just put us further in debt. You all know that, you can imagine. And on the tail of all this came World War II. And the economic landfall, financial landfall that comes with a war. I'm not saying the war was purposely entered into because of finances, but it surely was an issue. And hopefully, in your courses on American history and government, you debated things like this. You don't just read the book. The book gives you the descriptive stuff, when things happened and who made it happen, but the political climate at the time is what you should really debate and learn about. So, Social Security includes many things, but when you think of Social Security, you think of OASDA, Old Age Survivors and Disability Insurance. That's what it stands for. And it's a matching thing with your employer. If you read in the book, I have the exact matching amounts, but the employer gives the same as the employee. It's taken out of your paycheck, and everybody gives this, including those who are self-employed. Now, way back, there were people who opted out of Social Security. I believe railroad retirement did not have to pay Social Security back in the days when it started, but it's of no mind to you except intellectually. It's interesting. The railroads had a lot of exemptions in their life because they provided for their own. And that was their argument. We provide for our own from womb to tomb, sort of, so why should we buy into your program? And the railroads have declined in importance balance and strength in many sectors of this country. But they were really the glue that held the country together. They opened the West. They were dramatically important to this country. So early in their time, railroad people didn't pay into this, but then as Medicare came on the scene, it got more complicated. And now everyone, including the self-employed, if they're working on the books, pays into this. And you pay as much as the employer. It's interesting, in 2010, and this was the last year I could find, the dependency ratio in this country was 49%. Dependency ratio means how many workers and producers to non-workers and non-producers. Now, non-workers and non-producers are children. They're counted in there, children. They don't work and produce. We have child labor laws. There was a time when they did work, but not anymore. Old people, very old by age, or retirees, they do not produce. They may get a pension, but they do not produce. Unemployment, disabled, and on and on. 49%, 49 people out of every 100 were dependent on someone else in this country. So when we get criticism from abroad, that's what infuriates me. Who do you think is supporting these people? The people that work. And if there's too much of a disparity, obviously the economy is going to fold. You have to have people producing as well as taking. And by taking, I don't mean taking unjustly. We talked about children, about old folk, about sick people. There are people who justly worked when they could, but now they're taken care of by the state. All right, Medicare. Title 18 of Social Security. Sound very educated when you get out and you're working and you're rubbing shoulders in the rest of the healthcare system. There are titles 18 and 19. That's what everybody calls them. Medicare and Medicaid. Think of it as CARE, the elite program. CARE is the elite program. CAID, the poverty program. You want to think of it that way. Although everyone is not totally impoverished. But Medicare and CAID 18, 19. You will rarely hear, once you're out in the healthcare community, these programs called Medicare and Medicaid. Title 18 and 19. And 18 serves those over 65 with a designated period of Medicare-covered employment. Now, what does that mean? In order to cash in on Medicare and receive that employment, you have to have paid into the Medicare program for a certain number of quarters, I believe. All right? You just don't get it for nothing. That's why the elderly, one of their fiercest outcries in Washington, and AARP is the most powerful lobby in the United States. Don't kid yourself. Has more people, and now they are pushing people from 50 to join. They get younger every year. I used to be 65, now it's 50. And for your miserable $15, I think it is, you get 2 Superior magazines, you get discounts worth hundreds. They know how you get access to insurances which protect you, protect your Medicare from leaving you to death. It's well worth belonging, but they are, by everyone's opinion, the most powerful lobby in Washington. millions of people belong, and they're organized into little conclaves. All right, they're all under Washington, but every state has an AARP. New Jersey AARP is in Princeton, very powerful. They were, last year what they do. Last year they secured identity theft legislation, and this benefited more than the elderly, but the elderly were in uproar about it. They secured lower rates on water and gas and electric for seniors who were under a certain level of income. What else? Oh, they secured the money follows the person bill, which I mentioned earlier in the course, where you have the right now, if you qualify for a nursing home service, you have the right to have the government pay you that money and stay in your home. And you can bring in whatever services you want. Some very creative stuff, and all of the legislators listen to them because they represent so many people. All right, so you have to have paid into the Medicare program for a certain period of time, and but that is almost every senior citizen today who's coming from a job, and it covers some disabled under 65, like those that have end-stage renal disease and those that have Lou Gehrig's disease. Okay, it covers them, and all people, most Americans who have paid into Medicare receive Part A free. Part A covers hospital, not doctor, but hospital. So Part A is a given. Part B is optional. And this year, it's not cheap. It's $96.40 a month. And Part B pays for your out-of-hospital services, like laboratory, physiotherapy, physicians, and since most physicians will not take what Medicare gives them as full payment for their services, AARP sells what is called a Medigap insurance. Medigap. That's what it's called in the law, and there are laws covering this. Medigap. And those, the biggest provider of Medigap insurance is United Healthcare. And you see their ads on TV constantly. By all indications, they're a good insurer. AARP stands behind them, and everyone trusts AARP, so they dominate the market. But they sell a policy which will pay the tail, T-A-I-L, I guess, pay the tail. In other words, what won't be paid by Medicare, this policy will pay if you have it. All right? And they are the third party. Part C of Medicare is a managed care option. In other words, you can choose, instead of using A and B, to use C, and it's managed care. And what it does is covers everything that you're going to need, including drugs. But your options are decreased. You have to select your physician from among the list they have. You have to go to the hospitals that have struck deals and are providing care more reasonably. All right, and they do cover drugs. So many older Americans choose Part C. And Part D is the prescription drug coverage. In ACA 2010, there are provisions to access Part D to everyone through Medicare. All right? Right now, Part D is only good for people who have very high drug expenses or are very poor. The people in the middle-class Americans, don't get a good deal in Part D. But ACA 2010 supposedly is going to also close that hole for drugs for Americans. All right. There are a lot of other Medicare legislation that has passed since '65, and I'm just going to quickly. We mentioned already that Medicare was expanded to cover end-stage renal disease, and that's when, that was in '72, as soon as that happened, freestanding kidney dialysis centers became big business. You had no freestanding kidney dialysis centers before '72 because it wasn't paid for out of a hospital. You understand? As soon as they said, no, we're going to pay for end-stage renal disease treatments, which is dialysis, equals dialysis, in the community, there was a rush for establishing these centers, and there are many. And they have to be approved by the state, and they're of sufficient quality. But it's interesting, money drove the program. 82, the third one down, the Tax and Equity and Fiscal Responsibility Act, known as TEFRA, directed all government programs to adopt a model of prospective payment, all right? And that's when you had the DRGs and all of those other case mix acronyms begin to happen, all right? We discussed them in the midterm exam. DRGs is the one for hospitals, so ACEs for home care, the MDSs for nursing home care, etc. At the same time, the government established a system of peer review organizations. These are organized entities that review your Medicare records to make sure that you're admitting appropriately and discharging appropriately. You will be put on warning if they find out that you're keeping people too long or that you're sending them home in jeopardy just to get some extra dollars into a hospital. They pick this up and they review your records every so often to find this out. Okay, most of this you can read yourself. Let me draw your attention to the last one on this page. There was legislation that went through and established a program called PACE. PACE is an all-inclusive program for care of the elderly. You can choose to be taken care of in a PACE program rather than a nursing home. This was the earliest foreshadowing of some of the programs that are in ACA 2010. In ACA, you have provision for accountable care organizations, we mentioned those, and for several other programs where the providers of care are a team, not a nurse or a physician, but a team. And the aim of those programs, and there is one that has become very famous in Camden at Cooper Hospital. It's all over the internet. It's been up and running for several years. They've made a success of it. And they're treating people for fewer dollars and keeping them in their homes. and that's an Accountable Care Organization, ACO. And there are other such types of new formula for taking care of people, keeping them out of costly institutions, and giving them freedom of choice. But again, it's like the managed care. You can't choose where you're going to be. You can't choose the providers you're going to use. Most of these are team run. So the physician and the nurse are one among many. There is also the Navigator program, which you probably haven't heard as much about. That's a program which is used very extensively among the poor, particularly in areas which have a dense population of new immigrant groups, where language is a barrier, which is probably the biggest barrier, and they are teams of people who work in a neighborhood, who take care comprehensively of all the needs of families, the Navigator program. And all of these are federally funded because someone had a dream and put it together. Okay. We have OASIS and the ambulatory patient classifications for hospital ambulatory care. It was developed, but it has never been used. And many hospitals charge astronomical cost for the use of their emergency room. And some of that profit is shifted off to other places in the hospital that are controlled by ERGs and other types of systems. Any questions thus far?
Did you say that AARP is working on making the HMM 250 for the Medicare program?
No. AARP has, their marketing technique now is to reach out to people 50 and above to join. And a lot of them are. Because first, you probably at your age haven't seen their magazines. Their magazines are wonderful. And not just talking about what they do, the literature in it, and very good magazines, all free. And then you get another one from the New Jersey chapter, and that's free. Well, it's free for $20 a year. You can't beat that. $20 isn't much anymore. But they give you all of that to get a link into you. And then every other week, you're getting mailings from them. If you're a member, asking you to go talk to your congressmen, your senators, or if you don't have the time, just sign the form they send you, and they'll send it. They're very shrewd. And they're a watchdog group. Okay, why don't you take 10 minutes?
See, like, you go to number 6, it's at 4 summary, including the substitute that has 9 summaries. 1, 2, 3, 3 so far, 4, 5, 6. There's a lot to 4, no more than 4, so I know no more than 4 summaries. Yeah, one, that's what I did. Number 6 is summary 1. So summary 1 is 1. Summary 2 has only just one summary. I can break it up even though I acknowledge that they have some problems, but I still included it as one summary. So I wrote here, sorry, is it the larger log that I didn't summary in parentheses, but I made one summary. I didn't break it down like one. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is all on those. Yeah, I know. It's not a big deal. Only the first summary, the first thing was
The answer had 3.
come back together. All right, one of your classmates brought up an interesting point, and I think it's worth spending 5 minutes on. She asked about the peer review organizations that I just said are mandatory to do chart review within hospitals to determine if Medicare monies are being used properly. And many of the states use the same model to look at the monies from other insurers that are paid to hospitals too. In other words, to make sure hospitals are admitting appropriately. Should you be in a hospital? Secondly, are you discharged appropriately? Not too soon, because under Medicare, if you're discharged very quickly, the hospital makes a profit. You know how that goes. A certain number of days, the hospital pays for your diagnosis, and they pay that amount, whether you're discharged over those days or under. And if you're discharged under, you make a profit. So, N to C, maybe you're using too many days. That's also what the PROs look at. And if you're in there too long, there's really a very careful appeals process and a very careful look taken, because some people, like I know in University Hospital, and I'm not singling them out. This is common in many hospitals in inner city, many urban hospitals. You have people who, I know of people who are over there 60, 70 days. What's wrong? You know, something is, all right, they're too sick to be sent home. There is nobody home. If they get in home health aides, even to go in 2 or 3 times a week, they're not going to be there round the clock. In New York, they do provide some round-the-clock care. I don't know what the criteria are, but it's absurd to think the society can tolerate that forever. So they wind up being in the hospital for 80, 90 days. So a PRO, peer review organization, would look at that. It's called peer review because theoretically the criteria are made up by the hospitals themselves, and they're accepted by the federal government. And the people who go in are surveyors who are educated for exactly that purpose, to do these surveys. So that's one interpretation of peers. But your classmate asked me, what about peers? She's heard of hospitals where they have nurses looking at another nurse's practice and giving input to you as to how you could better take care of certain patients and things of that sort. That is another type of peer evaluation. And it is done by the best of hospitals. Most of the magnets do it. They do it internally. They have, all right, for instance, if you're on neonatal intensive care and they have a clinical ladder. In other words, a staff nurse isn't just a staff nurse. There's staff nurse 1, staff nurse 2, staff nurse 3, staff nurse 4, advanced practice nurse, and you can climb up. And every rung in the ladder means more money and more responsibilities, which help you get to the next rung. And peer review is part of that. Most institutions that have these ladders have you prepare a paper on your management of a patient that you feel was very difficult. It's reviewed by people who are above you or at your level on the ladder. They give you suggestions for better care. They critique your practice, and hopefully you learn, and so you climb up to the next rung. That is peer review too. But that is voluntary peer review for most situations. In a lot of hospitals, you don't have to climb the ladder, even if there is one. You could say, listen, I'm happy at rung 2. I'm just going to stay there. In other hospitals, you're not allowed to stay there. They'll say, we don't want someone who doesn't want to climb up. So if you can stay at it for a certain period of time, but if you don't move and try to have your practice peer reviewed, some will even discharge you if there's no union involved. They don't want anyone who's content with staying at the bottom forever. And that's, frankly, my opinion, that's the way it should be. That explained to you? Different types of peer review. And the peer review for the peer review organizations isn't really voluntary. You get it? You gotta do it. And if they find that there are discrepancies, they'll put a hospital on warning, and they'll send in other investigators, because you're working with government money for the most part. So they want to make sure that they get their money's worth. All right? All right, let's move on to Medicaid here, to Medicaid. And you all know that that is Title 19, 1819 of the Social Security Act. And it's a federal state means-tested program. In New Jersey, you qualify for Medicaid if you qualify for welfare. So there's only one means check, and if you qualify one, you qualify for the other. It's designed and administered by the states. The state prevails, always. Even though now there is a website that covers both of them that comes out from the federal government, the state rules prevail in Medicaid, because half of the money going in is state money. And there has been all sorts of creativity with that money. I always have to ask myself, what do you need to know? And what is it nice to know out of curiosity and to make you interested at your next party? That you don't appear to be an empty barrel, you know? But empty barrel, that's what the nuns used to call us. I don't see a laugh, so I figured you didn't know what it was. They used to call us empty barrels. Those were the kids that made a lot of noise, you know. They didn't know the system. Now we say it that way. The nuns used to come after you with their birch stick. I'm still from those days. Now they have the poor nun in jail. But she used to come after you with the stick and give it to you if you were an empty barrel. All right. So there have been all sorts of angles to get more out of Medicaid money. One way was that years ago, states were found putting their half of what they had to pay on the Medicaid program in a bank and getting interest. And that was deemed improper, so that was stopped. Many states did that, the ones that had it. They pulled it from other programs, put it in a bank, because they knew they owed the federal government that amount of money, and they accrued all sorts of interest. I thought that was a very neat trick, but the government stopped that. Okay. There are variations in who's covered and the rates for services. For instance, in New Jersey, the standard is welfare. In other states, it's welfare as defined in New Jersey, which is higher than the federal poverty level. Some states accept the federal poverty level because this means they have to cover fewer people. You understand? So it's whatever you can do to achieve the most economical route. There is dramatic differences in the amounts paid. And for those of you that have any interest, it wouldn't hurt for you to go and look some of these up. For instance, in Georgia, just because I know it, they pay $40-something a day for a nursing home. In New York City, it's almost $300 a day. Now, yes, there should be some adjustment for metropolitan areas, etc., but that is absurd. And so you find a lot of nursing homes in the South that have problems. Florida has had a lot of problems with nursing homes, and it stems back to the inability to pay for the proper personnel, etc., and it all comes back to the fact that there is a variation in who's covered and how much. The biggest payer from Medicaid monies is nursing homes. Medicare does not pay much towards nursing homes, even though we have a lot of senior citizens in nursing homes. Medicare does not pay much because in order to be paid in a nursing home, the government has to see progress towards leaving the nursing home. If you're not showing progress, now they will not pay for you. Now that rule was just changed about a month ago. Now the government is accepting progress towards getting more self-sufficient or maintenance. But if you're declining, Medicare will not pay for you in a nursing home. That's important for you to hear. So there's a double standard, either moving towards more self-care or self-sufficiency, or maintaining the person where they are. And I can imagine the skating around that criteria. Can't you? What does that mean? Maintaining you where you are and prove it. So it's another rule that probably is going to make for an awful lot of pain. All right, but they just changed that. Most Medicare recipients, so the most money out of Medicare goes into nursing homes right now, by far. And in some states, like New Jersey, anyone that is on Medicaid must enter a managed care plan. You have no choice. But there are a lot of managed care plans to choose from. And you can make the switch any day of your life. Like if you go you're a Medicaid recipient and you're having GI problems and you're not near your home, and you see a clinic with a sign out, Medicaid accepted, and you go in and they say, oh, we only accept United Healthcare. You can say, if you're a Medicaid recipient, well, I'll join. And they have to enroll you on the spot. All right? So there's every attempt to make Medicaid fair for the poor. That's what I'm trying to show you. Every attempt. Why do they allow them to change every day, like changing your socks every day if you want? Because I think they have, well, first of all, the poor use the healthcare system much more than middle-class Americans. that's been studied. The poor use the healthcare system. They'd be much more likely to go into a clinic for a sore on their foot. And some of this is good, all right, for an upset stomach, for a cold, than would a middle-class person who graduated from Rutgers last year. Much more use, exceptional use of the system. And the poor are often migrating from place to place, from different places where they live. So they've made it as easy as they can. You can change your plan every day if you have to for some reason. But you have to join a managed care plan, which limits your choices, but it gets you more health care. There are some exceptions to Medicaid, and we already mentioned this, like low-income women with children qualify for the Child First plan, qualify for other health care plans in New Jersey, which give more benefits, and they also they will give you the benefits if you earn more than the Medicaid person would earn. All right. In 1989, our Medicaid in New Jersey recognized family nurse practitioners and pediatric nurse practitioners, one of the early plans in the nation, Medicaid plans, to recognize them because our infant mortality rates and child health rates were quite low. So there was recognition of the family nurse practitioner and the pediatric nurse practitioner. And there have been a lot of modifications state to state in their Medicaid programs. Oregon is another one. Now, Oregon is the state that recognizes physician-assisted suicide. It has a very unique Medicaid plan. Years ago, probably in the 90s, probably, or late 80s, Oregon had to face the fact that they didn't have enough money to pay for all the people who were on Medicaid. So what it did is to bring together a group of consumers and healthcare providers, doctors, nurses, pharmacists, everyone. And they made a judgment about what would be covered because they realized everything could not be covered. They didn't have the money. And they made the judgment based on value. In other words, they completely covered certain things that showed a good value. Immunizations. You get a good bang for your buck there. A simple immunization, and you're covered for life for some diseases that were catastrophic to us at one time. And they went down the list, and the last on the list at that time, this is reviewed periodically, I don't know if it still would be, but the last on the list was heart transplant. Because they, at that point in time, they felt that those who were applying for that benefit were in poor physical condition anyway. Now, does it mean that, therefore, you throw that person away? No. You're entitled to hospital care if you need it. And there is what is called bad debt, and uncompensated care that every hospital in this country supports. All right? But it means you couldn't get your care through Medicaid in the state of Oregon. It's a very interesting period that it went through. A lot of people disagreed with their judgments, but they went ahead with it. They were very strong and said it's unrealistic. Everybody can get mediocre care or we can give good care to people who are applying for services that have good value. All right. So if you ever want to do an interesting paper, Oregon's history is interesting in that too. And you might not, on first exposure, you might not think Oregon would have so many wealthier people, but you know, rural America is very poor. We live here, there's a lot of urban poverty. New York is a mix. There's both urban poverty and affluence. But when you go into rural America, there is dramatic poverty, whole towns, especially with the change in industrialization and so on. And so they have, Oregon is also one of the first states to use nurse practitioners to the full scope of their license. They were doing that up there in the 80s. They were the only people who went out into these backwoods places and tended to people who were living there. And it's also one of the first states to use telemedicine. And one of you did a paper on telemedicine. That is where the patient is someplace far away from the nurse practitioner or the physician, and they are televised with good systems. They can zoom in. They can even zoom in and look down through. It's amazing, but most of the places, if you see this stuff in the inner city, there's something wrong. All right, but you see it mostly in places that are distant from centers of civilization, and we have a lot of those. So that's Oregon again. All right, 1 in 5 Americans in 2010, now that's 3 years ago, but with the turn down in our economy, I'd be surprised if it's much more, but 1 in 5 were enrolled in state Medicaid programs. That's an eye-opener. For a country that's accused of not taking care of its own, 1 in 5 people. And I bet you it's a lot more now. And 70% of these people were enrolled in managed care plans. And it probably is more than that now, because most states that I've heard of instituting changes in the last year or two, they require managed care plans. Why? Because they operate more economically. They use nurse practitioners and physician's assistants widely. That's one way that they cut costs. They reduce the degrees of freedom. Again, reduce the degrees of freedom. But there's no charge to the person. Now, interesting, looking at Google in the last week or so on Medscape, and Medscape is a site, if you haven't looked, go look, medscape.com, and you can put yourself on it so that it regularly comes to you if you want. But anyway, it has medical news, and it also has continuing education for nurses. Very interesting, that you can go in and take free and get the credits for. You don't need them, but you will when you have a license. You need a certain number of credits, and you can take courses free through Medscape. But Medscape said, and I forget which state, some state has begun charging Medicaid recipients a minimum. Like if you go in to a provider visit, you have to pay $2. Now, you may think this is nothing, but when you're living at the edge, it's a lot. But their thinking, their observation was that a lot of the visits were for things you shouldn't have to visit for. things that you could take care of through self-care. So they've increased their self-care opportunities and are charging per visit co-payment. That's interesting. And I don't know if there's any rules on the Medicaid site about this, but it's certainly odd to start charging. Okay, block grants. Block grants is something you should know about, even though, well, they're still there, but I have a hunch they're going to go bye-bye if you are observing the patterns of government. We are constantly in this country pulling more towards centrality of government. We're constantly pulling more into the national model. And what I think is irrelevant, I hope there's someone watching in Washington or Trenton as these things transpire. But it hadn't been usual. But for instance, discussion about advanced practice and all these websites that I read. There's more talk of having a national criteria for all advanced practice nurses instead of state by state. That's just one example. But under President Reagan, probably most of you can't remember back that far, that was 1980. When he came into office, we were in worse financial shape than now, if that's possible. Bad. And he turned around the country in 8 years. And one thing he did was to collapse all the money, not from all federal agencies, but from a lot of them, into federal categorical programs. He consolidated money. And he tried to decrease big government. So he gave the monies to the states in some equitable distribution. I can't speak to that, but I'm sure a state like, well, New York, although you get out of New York City, and there's highly rural areas, but let's say a New York or Jersey, the most densely populated state in the United States, remember that. Okay, he would divide up the money that would be handed down from the federal government in some equitable fashion and gave it directly to the states. And that way did away with the bureaucracy at the federal government, because you had duplicate bureaucracy. Bureaucracy at the state level, bureaucracy at the federal level, and people didn't like it. People naturally were afraid for their jobs and had a right to be. And the outcry was that there was too much politics at the local level, and the money isn't going to get to where it should because of the politics at the local level. These were all of the outcries. But he did this for many federal programs, consolidated them, and gave the money to the states. And he went in and did this, spits back right away, as you can see, 81. 81, maternal child health, preventive services, and mental health monies, all of them were carved up and given directly to the states. And the states had to justify how they used them, for what programs, what purposes, and I'm sure he didn't sit there himself and think all this through, but I'll say he felt that the states knew better than the federal government what they needed this money for. And it's logical. You have good people at the state level, and he believed in states' rights. So he streamlined the federal level. And in 1996, there was a welfare reform bill, and this was a block for public assistance. This was Bill Clinton, I believe. No, it was Bush 1. I have to think who was president when. But anyway, the Personal Responsibility and Accountability Act revolutionized welfare. It stipulated how long you could be on welfare, that you had to prepare for a life outside of welfare while you were on welfare, and all of these stipulations. So there have been, and it was given to the states as the welfare reform as a block grant again. SSI is a block grant. That's Social Security incentive. Elderly who make less than, I don't know, I used to know 4 years ago it was $500, it's probably more now, but who make a certain very low income from Social Security have their Social Security payments supplemented through SSI. And that was handed over as a block grant to the states. Nutrition programs, Medicaid, we can go on and on. So over the years, through Reagan, 80 to 88, and then Bush and Clinton and Bush, and there has been a decided mentality to give the states more and more right to decide how money put aside for their behalf should be used. All right? It decreases national bureaucracy, and theoretically should get money to where it's needed most quickly. Now, I can't help but think of Sandy and the money for the devastation through that storm. That was a block grant given to New Jersey, you know? The money's not getting where it's supposed to too quickly. At least the folk that I speak to who should qualify. But I can imagine if it had to go through the federal level and then down to the state, it would be worse. So there's some justification for the block grant philosophy. But some of the block grants are being pulled back up to the federal government. Okay. Here are some of the requirements for a state to qualify for a public assistance block. In other words, you don't have to take the block. But if you take the block, there are certain requirements. That's the model for all of them. And in public assistance, there's a limit of 60-month coverage. Adults must work 2 years in community service. Paternity determination and child support is mandatory. It used to be you couldn't find him. Well, we'll go after him because unmarried minor parents are to live with a supervising adult, and reduce benefits for immigrants. I hate the term alien, so immigrants. All of these requirements must be seen in the state law before you'll get a penny from the federal government. Interesting. All right, let's just quickly look over some other legislation that should be of interest to you. The Ryan White Act. And you all know Ryan White is a teenager who, he was one of the first, his mother, publicized his case, and that's why there was a bill named after him. It was first in the 90s. And he had AIDS. It was HIV positive. I think it was AIDS, though. It had progressed that far. And he was excluded from school. That was her issue. and she lobbied very effectively to justify AIDS sufferers as American with Disability Act recipients and so on. The Ryan White Act provides money to select areas in the U.S. that have very high incidence of AIDS. And Newark is one recipient, very high incidence here. And do you all remember, or I don't know how far your memory goes back, but when Cory Booker first came into office, of course, I guess you have to be ready to jump on board the first day you're there. Well, the first day he was there, the Ryan White Act was to be resubmitted for funding. And people in his administration didn't have their eye on the ball, didn't know what was happening. It passed, and they got no money. Now, you may think that the federal government is like me. You can send me an email and say, oh, I had well, don't tell me you had a rough night, but somebody was sick, I was out of the country, can I have another day? In the federal government, you miss it by 5 minutes, goodbye. There's no, and they have to be that way. But anyway, Newark lost millions of money. And what it is used for primarily is AIDS education and AIDS programs which are supportive to the AIDS community. AIDS housing, shelters, and I'm sure there are many other things, but that's what it's used for. It's only given to the U.S. cities that have the highest incidence of AIDS, and Newark was one of them. Immigration and AIDS has ceased to be a big issue. If you have AIDS, you can immigrate to the U.S. Years ago, in the 90s, this was a heated debate in Washington over this, because treatment of AIDS patients had not progressed to the point where we had the drugs that we have now. Now, a person who is HIV positive or who has AIDS can live a normal lifespan. You'll never be cured, but you can live a normal lifespan. And the Science Times had something in last week. They have found something which looks hopeful for a cure. It would be wonderful, but there was very contentious arguments around admitting into this country, admitting at all people with AIDS. Why? Because in those days there was, well, there still is no cure, but it was progressive, and AIDS patients wound up to be a significant drain on the economy if they stayed, because they all became frail, unable to work. There was a whole hospital up in the Pompton Lakes area. Does anyone live up there? No? They established a new nursing home up there in the 90s just for AIDS patients, because AIDS patients were not dying from the carcoses and the other things, the normal side effects of AIDS. They were living past that, but they were going down very quickly and becoming very frail and debilitating. Now it's a different story. Forget about the other two. We already talked about AHCRQ and immunization. There are always battles around immunization, and the government, the federal government, maintains a fund for people who have severe reactions to immunization. Now, you're probably thinking why? Because the drug companies manufacture the vaccine, and they do wonderful things. But there will be a certain amount of people who have an untoward effect. It is not a reason to stop making the vaccine. And if the drug company has to ensure and has to stand the cost from cases against it because of untoward reactions to immunization, they will stop making it. All right? That was a battle that was fought in the 90s, around 2000. So the government, in fact, insures them. You could say that, insures them. Nursing education is highly dependent on federal funds. And I don't want to go into talking about it, but the Nurse Training Act has been refunded every year for generations. And you might be thinking, she's talking about all these federal monies into nursing education. I'm not getting any. You are getting some, even if it is a secondary benefit. Monies flow to the College of Nursing. Nursing is a very expensive program, in case you didn't know it. In biology and English and history, you can teach this room full of students. Give me a few teaching assistants to divvy up the paper correcting, etc., but you can teach hundreds at one point. We are held to 10 students per instructor in all clinical areas. So, and even that is too much. Some states have reduced it to 6. How can you let 10 students who know next to nothing, and that's not said pejoratively, I mean it kindly, but you know next to nothing, to set you loose on a medical surgical floor with people with intravenous's hanging and yelling for pain medication, and how can you set 10 of you loose with one instructor? It's almost impossible. So some states have revised, and this is in law. Here we're still 10 to 1, but that's a very expensive program. So there is money that comes into the school and to personal scholarships for people. And again, if you're interested, go see Kyle Warren, ask him, or one of his gang over there. You all know about the Civil Rights Act, and the Equal Opportunity Fund was developed and established as a direct outgrowth of the Civil Rights Act of '64. Know that in Rutgers, nursing is the only program that has its own EOF monies and a program. It's the only EOF. The other EOF programs in Rutgers are generic. They cover students from multiple disciplines. I believe we're the only one in the state. I know of no other university that has an EOF program. Now, I had thought that the EOF program gave you much more in terms of economic benefits than it does. That's going to be my job after I get all your grades in. I want to look into that. But we are the only EOF program for nursing, as far as I know, in the state of New Jersey. I don't know if there exist in other places. And you can thank Bobby Perdue. You'll never remember the name, but she was the lady who established the first EOF program in nursing at Rutgers, Bobby Perdue. And she's currently a professor at Rochester, SUNY Rochester, I think. Wonderful woman, and she had a lot of forethought. And what has happened, the EOF program here, and they have a nursing leadership conference that Dr. Stevens has brought together of nursing leaders in the state of New Jersey who went through that EOF program. A wonderful opportunity. Once you're in nursing, they have a program once or twice a year, making your business to go. Those people are fiercely committed to our EOF program. And
what is the main goal of EOF?
what?
What is the main goal?
Oh, the main goal of EOF is to support students who have been educationally and or financially deprived. All right? So, a lot of the students in that program are from high schools which are in sections of New Jersey that are not the best sections and have not had the financial means to do all that they can. The GREs, not GREs, the SAT scores are not looked at for admission of those students either. All right, in case you didn't know that. They don't look. They put a lot of weight on personal interviews. And it's for students who are financially and educationally deprived. They may come in with massive deficits in writing and in math. If so, there are other university services to help with that, and they provide tutoring. They provide tutoring in certain nursing courses, and Dr. Stevens has always been very generous. Her students are naturally her first concern, but she will take any other students that want to come to those tutoring sessions, and they have proven very valuable. They reach into the Newark City schools, and they run workshops in the summer before a fall admission for students who are going to be coming in, and those students often have massive deficits, but they're worked with here, whether they're accepted in the program. They haven't been accepted yet, but it gives her a chance to look at who has the most potential. And then the leadership committee is formed from graduates of the program, and you have some of the most prominent ethnic and racially diverse leaders in the state in that program. It's magnificent to see who she has had through. And you have students, not that this is good, but I might as well tell you, you have students who have gone through it and gone on to medical school, have gone on to business school, not many. Most stay in nursing, but we have people in the doctoral program from our program. So it not only gives the help with education and finances, it also provides a support system. And anyone in here in the EOF program? Okay. You know you can go back to that office anytime. Does she have a place set up where you can just sit down and talk? Does she?
Yeah.
Yeah, because they did when they were in this building, before they moved into the new offices. She had one large office where you could go in any time. There was always someone there, and you could talk. She took books that faculty wanted to get rid of and had them in there. You can go in and help yourself. It's a support system for students. Very effective. Okay, the Civil Rights Act prohibits discrimination against women, but a lot of other people. HIV and AIDS patients, substance abusers. You can't discriminate against them. There are a lot of, and you should make yourself conversant if you may protect. Okay. The Freedom of Information Act and HIPAA, you know that you're all guaranteed exclusive access to your school records unless you give permission that someone else can look. Parents, nobody. Parents are not the big issue in Newark. I found out that over the years, students are relatively autonomous and they know the rules and they like them. But in some universities, you get into real fights with parents who feel they have a right to the records. I'm paying, so I should have a right to the records. I love that. I like to laugh at them. So what does that mean? You know, you are paying because you chose to pay. Doesn't give you the right to your child's records. And this becomes culturally a problem for a lot of people, that they feel just like whether it's abortion or birth control or anything, there are minors who have the right to protection in this country, and surely when you're over 21, you drive your own ship. If you want to give people access to your records, you can do that, but it's not usual. And HIPAA, we hear a lot about HIPAA. HIPAA is the electronic, that's why it's called portability. It's the electronic security of health information. And HIPAA will be a driving force more and more as you go on. By this summer, the end of the summer, I think all providers have to be using electronic sources to transmit their data for payment. And doctors, a person in a mediocre size primary care practice, just because I talked to someone last week, it's going to cost him $9,000 a month for the electronic transmittal of data to the government, and the government will not, this of course is not just putting the numbers in the computer and pressing send, it's screening the data to make sure your coding is getting your maximum. It's a lot more detailed, but there are people who, if they saw this day coming, and I know a few of them, can be making a fortune on data transmission for healthcare providers. Just to quickly look over this. The Taft-Hartley laws were very important in labor relations. And until the Taft-Hartley amendments, I don't know if you have these down, they'll be in your book. The Taft-Hartley amendments in '74, you could not unionize in nonprofit healthcare facilities because they had a noble mission. The government didn't want nonprofit healthcare facilities saddled with unions and their demands. And in New Jersey, until probably 15 years ago, we had no profit-making hospital in this state. It was weird. The whole United States thought we were weird. We had none. Then you had people coming in, offering business contracts and getting involved in healthcare, and now we have a great number of profit makers. But until '74, those nonprofit hospitals could not unionize. And in '74, with the Taft-Hartley amendments, the gates were open to unionize everyone. I can remember in '74 giving away my age. I was in Atlantic City for the ANA convention, the American Nurses Association. And we were inside debating on something, and all of a sudden we heard shouting and screaming from the streets. We thought it was some type of civil disaster. We went out. It was the union organizers from around the state, thousands of them cheering for nurses, because now we could be organized. And don't get the idea of unionization being an undercover, slimy area. It's not. When you need a union, you need it. What a union does is to level the playing field between management and labor. Gives you, the worker, the same rights as you, the boss. And in Europe, this comes from the guild system, where skilled technicians met with bosses and struck deals to save their industries. That's not how it was here. In the U.S., unions came out of spirit of adversarialism. The Dunlop Commission in '95 attempted to bring labor and management together and institute some of those feelings of closeness that were present in other countries. Didn't work so much, except for the UAW, United Automobile Workers, did come closer to management and saved their industry. If you look at the history in this last recession, the only automobile worker to come up on top and pay off its debts for Ford was Ford. So I happen to think some of that stems back to the Dunlop Commission, but not much else. Workers' compensation, that's when you get hurt on the job and you strike a deal with your employer that you're not going to sue, but neither of you are wrong. That's the deal. There's not blame on either side, and the boss will take care of your injuries, and sometimes there's a settlement. And OSHA is the executive branch agency that takes care of occupational safety and health administration, OSHA. And NIOSH is the branch of the Institutes of Health that studies the workplace problems and then gives the results to OSHA, National Institute Occupational Safety and Health. And give you one example of something that went that route lately. The new regulations in nursing homes that you must have Hoyer lifts. You must have lifts to take people out of the bed because of the astronomical cost in back injuries in workers' comp. So NIOSH studied it and told OSHA this should be a regulation, and it's a regulation now, that you have to have lifts to get people out of bed. Any questions? You have to have them, but let them germinate then. Now remember, next week there's no class, and I will put that on your announcements. I forgot about it. I put it on right away. And the week after that, there is class. Okay? And a few of you will be receiving emails from me. We're down to the last 4 papers. You haven't received one. And as I go through, which always happens, I find I didn't get a few of them. That's okay. There's no penalty, because it could have been my computer, could have been yours. Electronics are not perfect. I'm sure you'll find this out too. So I'm not going to impose any penalty, but there are a few of you, maybe 3, that will get email saying, where is it? And I spent 3 hours going through because my computer retains almost everything. I couldn't find them, so I'm pretty sure they didn't get there. Okay, so I'll see you again next. Goodbye. Now, it was just the paper, the minutes, and the notes. If you don't find it, send me an email. All right? Are you looking at
Take care.